Today we do an easy MSD install. It's a piece of cake, simple. Like nothing to it at all. Okay, so it's time to do something a little different, and I'm going to take kind of a different direction with the channel, I think, from here on out. Today we're going to be working on our 63 Galaxy, known as Legacy, our Southeast Gasser super stock car. And we're going to make some changes that I hope bring us some better luck in the future. So what I'm about to do is go to a full MSD setup. I've never ran an MSD setup before, and I'll get into reasons why here in a moment. And I'll show you what I'm running. I'll tell you why I'm making a change, and I'll tell you why I've never used the MSD setup before. So let's get the hood off and let's take a look at what I'm running and the reasons why I'm running it, and then we'll get into the MSD setup and kind of how I install the setup. So let's get into it. So what I'm running is a full Pentronics ignition. Excuse the one oddball wire. I had a wire issue at Ohio, and this is the first time I've touched the car since Ohio. But let's talk about the ignition. I'm running a full Pentronics ignition. Now, if you look at my engine, other than the coil right there, which again, that was a quick thing, it looks mostly stock. It has headers on it, it has aluminum intake, but it looks mostly stock. I'm running factory Ford heads, or at least I'm running factory Ford casted heads. The casting numbers and the castings all actually that steel Ford. They've had a lot of work done on them. Yes, I know I could have got aluminum heads and probably had less money in it, but I wanted this car to appear factory 1963, which is why I went with Pentronics. Originally I was going to do a dual point distributor, but at high RPMs you can get some flutter in there, and it was causing some breakup issues. So full Pentronics. So it appears, if you look at it, like a points distributor. Now, I've done some extra work with this distributor, but I did this to try to keep the stock Ford appearance to it. But there's some issues. This thing has a built-in rev limiter, which is starting to give me some problems. So the built-in rev limiter is giving me some problems. It seems to be fluctuating on its own. Now, I am not in any way knocking Pentronics. I've had that distributor in this car since late 2018, early 2019. And I have beat the snot out of this stuff. And it's hung right in there. So I'm not knocking Pentronics. It just doesn't seem to be able to keep up with what I'm trying to do. And now with it having some issues with the rev limiter stuff, I think it's time for me to move on. Now, I've never ran an MSD system. I've never ran an MSD system because I like the stock 60s look. This car, everything on this car, with the exception of the ride height, is 60s correct. Almost everything on this car that you can visually see, except for the suspension, has 60s Ford part numbers cast on them. Been very diligent to keep this car 60s correct, but we're biting the bullet and we're going to MSD. So we got to pull this system apart now. Now, this is not the way you have to do it. This is the way I do it. I take the cap off, the old cap off, and I mark a plug wire, which in this case it's going to be right here. I'm gonna mark a plug wire, mark it on the distributor, pull the cap off, and it's where the rotor button is. So now what I can do is pull this distributor out, drop the rotor button back in the same place on the same cylinder, wire up the new cap with the fire in order, and it should be close enough to start the engine. Some guys out there that'll want to bring it all the way back around to number one, top dead center, and do all that. This is just what I find is easier with changing the distributor, is to simply rotate it or take the cap off, see where the rotor button is, and if it's in between two, just bump it to the next one or whatever. mark that plug wire is where that rotor button is pointing center of. Pull it apart, put your old distributor in, point it in the same place, wire it the same, or put your plug wires in the same, and it should be close enough to start. So here's my Huckleberry. MSD, the MSD Pro Billet distributor. That's my Huckleberry. These are very tunable. I'm not going to tell you what I'm running in this one, because you don't need to run necessarily the same thing I'm running, but they're very tunable. I've changed the curve in this one. You can do that. It's very simple. It's 2 springs and a bushing, and you can do it. So I have the curve in here I think is best for my engine. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I won't know for sure till I put it in there, but that's it. So let's get through the process of swapping this thing out. Now, I've got the hold down off of it, so the distributor's ready to come out. Now, with an FE, one of the scarier parts of replacing the distributor with FE is the drive shaft that goes from the bottom of the distributor down to the oil pump. Now, I know if a lot of guys hadn't fooled with a lot of FEs, especially the older ones, you're used to seeing a retaining clip on that little drive shaft. The majority, despite what you have heard, the majority of FEs do not have that on there. You can get them aftermarket with it, but the majority of them does not have it, and this one doesn't. So one of the scary parts is you have to be very careful pulling this out so that you don't pull the drive shaft loose from the oil pump and then it come out of the distributor and fall down the oil pan. Do not want that to happen, because then it turns into a big job. So we've got to be very careful pulling this out. All right, so let's try to make the magic happen here very slowly. Now, I don't mind if the drive shaft comes out as long as it stays on the distributor. I, of course, would prefer that it stay in the oil pump like that. So we've got her out. Everything looks good. We're going to give a quick peek. The drive shaft did stay engaged in the oil pump. We're great. We're golden. Now it's time to install the new one. Now, before I put the new one in, they come with this. They come with this for a reason. Put some on your gear to help it when it starts up. Now, I'll speak about the gear for a second. Now, I'm not going to tell you my cam combination or anything. There's certain things I just ain't going to tell nobody. But let's talk about the gears. You need to make sure that you have the right gear for the cam you're running. Some cams require softer material, some don't. Some have brass, some have steel, some have whatever. Just make sure the gear that you have on your distributor will work with the cam that you are running. All right. Time to do this thing. Do the thing. All right. Do the thing. Do the thing. We gotta do the thing into place. Nice new MSD distributor sitting there. I'm gonna put the hold down clamp on. I'm gonna leave it loose. I'm gonna set the cap on and get the cap in line with one so I can start my wiring from where it was with the old one. Okay, cap is on, hold down is snug, not cranked down tight, but snugged. And we have lined the rotor button up with this position on the cap. Speaking of wires, my broke ass can't afford the MSD wires. Spent all the money on the distributor and the 6AL box. So we're going with Ford racing wires. And as I do them, I pull the old one off just so I know where I left off at. The next one will be number 4. These Ford Motorsport wires actually have the numbers right there on them. 4 tell you exactly which cylinder they go to. I
never had nothing this here fancy before. Ooh-wee. She's a fancying boy. She's a fancying. Never had anything this fancy. Fancy, fancy. Oh, that was number 4. That one's tied together, so with the other one there. So get that out of the way. And then it looks like it's going to be. Looks like it's going to be the number 2 cylinder. Number 2. Number 2. Number 2Y. Number 2Y. Where you at? Uh-oh. That's it. Number 2. Is this number 2? Where you at, number 2? Where you at, number? This is number 2. Number 2 right here. Number 2 in the house. All right. Number 2. And there it is. I'll tell you right now, that right there is as pretty. Well, there you go. Boy, that's Americana, ain't it? A little red, white, and blue going on in here. Not intentional again, folks. But we'll get in here with some wire separators now and clean all this up and make it look better. But the next thing I'm going to do is get started wiring the MSD box and all. Because, again, I've never done an MSD box before. So we're going to get started doing that. Actually, that's driving me nuts. So I'm probably going to go ahead and clean these wires up and make them look a little nicer. I think that's what I'm going to do next. I don't know how many other people do it, but I personally like a zip tie wire loom, plug wire loom, or plug wire, whatever you want to call it. Freaking divide the plug wires. Come on, people, listen faster. I personally like to do it that way. It cleans it up. It looks really nice. And these ain't gonna come apart. So if you're at a track or side of the road, whatever the case may be, and you need to do some work on your ignition system, you need to change your plugs. Maybe you just have a hobby of taking plug wires off, putting them on. I don't know. The point is, you do it this way. When you unhook them, they all stay in the right order. So you can pull your plug wires off, walk off, you'll get some tacos. I'm more of a hamburger man myself, but whatever, you go get some and you come back and they're still all in the right order. Key to making it look good is cutting all your zip ties good and flush when you're done, and not leaving the big long tails. And if you can, if it's possible, you know, just go ahead and cut them at a jagged angle so they slice your artery the next time you reach in there, and you just bleed out on the side of your motor. But yeah, that looks a lot nicer. You can see how I got them tied there and there and there. Keeps all your wires nice and neat and tucked together. Of course, honestly, I like them done that way so they stay in order, but these Ford racing wires are all numbered, so you can't really get them mixed up anyway. Shoo-wee, ain't that pretty? All cleaned up, and wires got the swoopies going on, but the MSD distributor is in. The Ford racing wires are on. Now we just got to do the 6AL box. I was so obsessed for so long with the correct look
that I never wanted anything extra on the car like a 6AL box, and I've never ran one before. So what I'm going to do this time is try to keep that theme anyway. I'm actually going to go under the dash. I want that correct look, so that's what I'm going to go for, and I'm going to try to keep this car to have the correct look other than the lift kit that's on it that I got to have. But anyway, I'm going to keep as much of the correct look as I can, so that'll be the next thing. So let's get the 6AL box out, take a look at it, and try to come up with a good idea on where to mount it, what we'll have to do about our wiring and those sort of things. All right, so here's our MSD 6AL 6,000 wire setup. So this is where I'm going. I think it's time for me to update and upgrade and move up in the world a little bit to a different setup, and I think this is what I'm going to go with. Well, this is what I'm going to go with because I already bought it. Got a rev limiter. It's right on here, 2 dials. You can set your thousandths and your hundredths. It's as simple as it can be. Well, although it looks like a lot of wiring, it's one main harness. It will control my coil, tack, the distributor. Everything will be controlled through this one box. Now, a lot of people would come out here and mount it somewhere out of the way back here, but again, I don't want to do that. I don't want it seen from the outside, so I think what I'm going to do, I got to take some measurements and see if it'll work. I may put it right on the other side of this where I pulled my heater box out and made this. I think I'm going to mount it right on the back side of that. That way I can run my wires right through here, and I think it'll be out of the way. So let's see if it'll work. Okay, first things first, we know we want it mounted on the other side of this area right here. So let's lay it in the seat and let's start getting some wiring that goes in there out of here. So out of this box full of wiring, it's hard to do this one-handed, but let's try. This box full of wiring, I need this first. This is the harness that connects my distributor to the MSD box. So I want to see, we'll connect it, run it on there, drop it inside, and see how much space I have, because I don't want to cut and trim any wiring. I kind of want to use the advantage of the wiring that I have. That and just one other wire here is all that comes out here. The rest of them all be wired inside. Now it's kind of hard to imagine, but a car that I've only got 4 wires on to start with is simplifying the wiring, because now I have these wires going in, which means a couple of these can come out. So the wiring for the distributor, now we'll just feed it through this hole over here where this grommet is and move to the inside and mount the box. But I will be cleaning up some of this wiring right through here. As I'm using this, I'm thinking about maybe some of the wire loom stuff and go over this and make it look a little nicer. But it's as simple as that. Plug this harness up to the one in the distributor right there. If you can see that, hold on, yep. Plug those up right there, and then just run this to the inside of the car, and it'll plug up to this harness, which plugs up to the box. Okay, well, there she is, up and under the dash. So that means if I plug in this, let me scooch up under here. Oh, yep. Wait a minute. I'm not meant to bend this way, folks. Hang on. If I and plug that up, that means we're all done. Oh, never mind. I still got to do something with all this. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Okay, I know with a lot of wires, sometimes they get just overwhelming, but
It really is simple. We've got this wire right here comes out, and I've got it running the same ground that the chassis ground, engine ground, all that's running the same place. We've got this harness right here that comes through. It's a little 2-wire harness. It goes to the distributors we showed before. And then we've got this one right here that comes through, and it goes over here. And the Excel coil is just there for, well, I hadn't took it off yet. These are the wires now that will activate the coil. They come over here, hot and the ground wire. I'll put that on with my new MSD coil. So they're really not complicated. Now, there is a switch wire still left in there. There is a tack signal wire, so my tack will no longer go to the coil out here. It'll be pulled back through and now run across to the MSD box, and I'll get my signal from it. There's really not much to it. This is my first 6AL box, and I can tell you, if I can do it, then anybody can do it. It really is painfully simple. I've got to hook up the power wire, the switch wire. I can't talk. Apparently putting this in is easier than actually telling you how to do it. There is a power wire, switch wire, a tack signal wire, and I think that's all I got left to hook up. So as I was saying outside, I've only got these wires left. Now this white wire will not get used. This white wire, this wire, is a signal if you're running a points distributor. Don't need that. This gray wire is now my new tack signal. So I got to run that over the tack. Whoop. These 2 wires right here, this is my constant 12 volt, the hot wire, and this is my switch wire. So I'm going to run the constant 12 volt to, well, the battery, constant 12 volt, and then I'll run my switch wire to my switch. And in theory, once I hook the coil up, the car should fire right back up, and we should be able to set the timing. So all I got left to do now is make my connection to the coil with a wire that's laying right here. I'll connect these wires to the coil, and we should be able to test it, see if it's cranked up. Now, of course, I'm eventually putting the MSD coil there, but for testing purposes, we're going to use this Excel coil because it's already there. So once we hook that up, we should be able to connect the battery and turn the power on, check everything, and see if it makes those vroom vroom noises. Okay, we're at the point now. Coil's connected. Actually, no, it's not. I'm going to hook the coil back up. Then I'm going to turn the power on and make sure we got a little light on the MSD box. If we do, we're going to try to start her up. There you go, fellers. That's how you install the MSD box. That's how I install the MSD box. And as you can see, it fired up. Our timing is obviously a little off. Figured that. But it works. So there you go. Now, I'm not going to bore you with how to set the timing. Most of you guys already know how to set timing. Not going to bore you with that. Not going to make you sit and watch me pull out a timing light and look at numbers and turn a distributor and all that stuff. You pretty much understand that. So this was just how I fumbled my way through installing the MSD box. As I stated from the beginning of it, this is my first MSD box. And honestly, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It was fairly simple, straightforward, really not anything to it. So hopefully
if you've never done one before, this will give you enough information to where you can kind of trip your way and fumble your way through it. So there you go, fellers. There's one of them informational. I gave y'all some info. Do with it what you want. Hopefully, you'll hit that like button, subscribe, help the channel grow. We'll do more of this stuff if you like it. So there you go. That's it. Nutshell. Well, go on, do something else. I'm done.